get for the midterms. If you pass the midterms, so the midterms are fail or pass. Basically, you get a total score, and the total score needs to be above, what is that, 18. Above 18, you get an automatic 6 without taking the exam. So for those of you who actually take both midterms, and you pass them, passing means you get 9 and above, 9 points or above. For those of you, you can get an automatic 6 without taking the exam. And that is until January. Okay? For those of you who fail the midterms, one or both, regardless, because if you fail one, you are probably not going to be able, well, if you fail one, you don't even have to take the second one because you have to pass both midterms. For those of you who pass the midterms with flying colors, which means, let's say, 12 points and above, let me write it down, 12 points and above each, you get an automatic 7 in January. If you want to get a higher grade, you can take the exam in January and write the essay and get, a higher grade. And that's it. From, let's say, April on, so January term is the first term, then we have April, then we have the June term, then we have the September, October 1, October 2, potentially October 3. For each of those exam terms, you take everything. You take the two midterm tests and the exam question for any grade, that is. Da li me razumete? Da, Teodora. Recite, Teodora. Teodora je nestala, izgleda. Da li ste razumeli? Znači, imamo dva Ajde, Teodora, recite.
I accidentally clicked on turn off. Okay. So what about us older students? What about the November term and December term?
Ne, znači, Teodora, vi slušate sada sa prvom godinom i što se mene tiče, vi ste sada student koji sluša po novom programu. Vi nemate prava, što se mene tiče, vi možete da polažete u novembru i u decembru, ali onda polažete po onim starim pravilima.
Važi.
Ali onda ne znam zašto dolazite na času.
Pa onako da uđem da se podsjetim, ništa.
I zadovoljstva, znači?
Da.
Ok. Ali ako izađete u novembru i decembru, onda je to. Ja vas računam kao apsolventa, znači vi morate da se odlučite. Ne možete sad da mi polažete i kolokvijume i onda da polažete u januaru po ovim novim pravilima, a da umeđu vremenu polažete i po starim. Jel me razumete?
Razumem, ali ako padnem u novembru ili decembru, šta onda?
Ako padnete na ova, onda morate položiti po novom u januaru, da.
Važi.
Ali to znači da vama onda ne računam kolokvijuma ovako na način na koji računam njima.
Da.
Nego vi polažete oba kolokvijuma, to je 30 pitanja, plus esejsko pitanje.
Dobro.
To je to.
Važi.
Šta to znači za vas znači praktično? Verovatno vam je sad ovo malo zbunjujuće. To znači, vi dobijete 15 pitanja na prvom kolokvijumu. Dobijete 9 poena. Polažete drugi kolokvijum, dobijete još 9 poena. Vi imate 18 poena od ukupno 30 koje je moguće osvojiti na kolokvijumu. Vi imate automatsku šesticu. Vi se meni pre ispita u januarskom roku javite i kažete ja hoću da upišem šesticu. Ja pogledam vaš skor i kažem aha, vi ste prošli toliko i toliko, dobijete 6. Osvojili ste više poena, osvojili ste 12 na prvom kolokvijumu, 13 na drugom. Ne želite da polažete za veću ocenu, vi dobijate automatsku sedmicu. I to je to. Niste polagali ni jedan kolokvijum, vi onda u januarskom roku, ili ste pali ova kolokvijuma recimo, vi onda u januarskom roku polažete i taj, odnosno radite i taj test, prvi i drugi, i esejsko pitanje. Ispit će trajati otprilike 3 sata. Za vas. Za ostale će ispit, za one koji su položili oba kolokvijuma, ispit će trajati sat vremena. Pisanje eseja. I to je to. Da li razumete ovo? I još najbitnija stvar od svega. Ovi uslovi sa kolokvijumom važi isključivo do januarskog roka. U svakom narednom roku, april, jun, septembar, oktobar 1, oktobar 2, oktobar 3, morate u stvari da položite sve delove. A to je 30 pitanja, odnosno midterm 1, midterm 2 i esejsko pitanje. Esejsko pitanje biće u vezi sa onim što ćete vi raditi i sa Marijom Budimski, sa saradnicom. To će znači da ćete dobiti jedno vrlo, vrlo konkretno pitanje. Znači, to neće biti pitanje kao što su nekada bila iz ovog predmeta, to je recimo the plantagenets. I vi sad pišete sve o plantagenetima. Ne. Dobit ćete recimo odlomak iz jednog dela. To će biti ili Robert Lacey ili nešto što ćete raditi sa njom. Već ćete na sledećem času, ne ove nedelje, nego već u sledeće nedelje ćete dobiti i primer tih pitanja i tekstove otprilike koje ćete raditi sa njom i tako dalje. I onda ćete morati da nam da objasnite prosto kontekst. U kom se kontekstu nešto dešava. Što znači ako recimo u tekstu se govori o Peasants' Revolt, što je jako bitna jedna stvar koja se desila u 13. veku, vi ćete morati da objasnite okolnosti istorijske koje se dešavaju u tom veku i da odgovorite na još neka potpitanja. Što to praktično znači? To praktično znači da vi nećete moći da prepisujete. Dakle, online konsultacije apsolutno neće biti moguće, osim ako nemate toliko, da kažem, sposobnosti da stvarno izgooglate ono, ne znam ja šta, i da još sastavite esej, super, ono, if you can trick me and I don't see it, good for you, you know? I can't be that. But basically, you will be asked to think about these questions. Da li vam je to jasno? To ne znači da ćete dobiti naravno nešto što nećete moći da u startu shvatite, aha, o tome se radi. Ne, mislim, bit će vrlo jasno o čemu se radi. Postojeće imena koje će vam vrlo dati kontekst. Tu će najvjerojatnije biti tekstovi koji ste već radili sa Marijom na časovima. Ako niste radili baš taj odlomak iz teksta, radit ćete druge, vi ste dobili celo poglavlje, tako da definitivno ste mogli da pročitate. Tako da nećete dobiti ništa nepoznato s jedne strane, ali nećete dobiti pitanje, izdeklamuj mi lekciju o recimo prvim ljudima koji su naselili, prvim narodima koji su naselili Britanska ostrva. Prosto ne. Nego nešto gde ćete zaista morati da razmislite. I to je to. Da li razumete? Molim vas odgovorite i u chat box, ne morate. Mislim, molim vas da reagujete nekako. Chat box je sasvim ok da koristite.
Razumemo.
Recite, Anastazija.
Da pitam samo, kog tačno, me čujete?
Da.
Kog tačno datuma je kolokvijum?
Prvi kolokvijum imat ćemo zadnje nedelje novembra, što znači da ćemo do tad preći recimo prvu polovinu lekcije, odnosno prvu polovinu knjige. Drugi kolokvijum imat ćemo recimo na prvom času po povratku sa odmora ili drugom času. Imat ćete ga u terminu imat ćete ga u terminu vežbi sa Marijom i to je to. Znači na mesecu dana.
Hvala.
To je to. Na taj način zaista, či oni od vas koji nemaju nikakve aspiracije ka visokim ocenama na ovom predmetu, iz kojih god vama razloga, što znate sami da ja uopšte ne podržavam i niti ću ikada ohrabrivati, ali da prosto ne, Katarina, ne dobijate pitanja preko kojih učite, mislim, sa tim zaista nema potrebe. Vi, kao što smo govorili ranije, vi učite činjenice, tako? I potrebno je da baratate tim činjenicama. Ako vas ja pitam zašto je William of Normandy bio jedan od najmoćnijih vladara i zašto je tako lako porobio Englesku i dam vam odlomak iz teksta gde se govori baš o tome kako je lako porobio Englesku, vi bi trebalo da znate zašto. Vi bi trebalo da imate pregled otprilike od najranijih kraljevstava u Engleskoj i da shvatite gde je sve pošlo po zlu. I šta se desilo u tih recimo 10-15 godina pre te normanskog osvajanja Engleske i kako je to prosto uticalo na situaciju kad je William krenuo zapravo eto baš u to osvajanje septembra. Znate, to nije prosto, nemate pitanja prosto koja bi trebalo da naučite. Mislim, i ovo nije fakultet prava ili ekonomije da imate neka pitanja, puškice i šta god. Treba da razmislite o svemu. A to neće biti pitanje koje ću vam ja sad dati da se vi razmišljate satima, nego prosto, aha, to me pita, znam, ne znam. I to je to. Neću vam tražiti, kao što rekao 1000 puta, neću vam tražiti da znate godine, kada je koji vladar počeo da vlada, osim za pojedine vladare, gde je to zaista, da kažem, bitno, kao što je to, eto, recimo, bitno za William of Normandy and the Norman Invasion, zašto to predstavlja jednu prekretnicu prosto u engleskoj istoriji, u više smisla, ali o tome ćemo pričati kada dođe dotle. I to je jedna od onih godina, datuma koje treba znati i prosto zbog neke ideje, vremenske ideje, prosto kažem da vi imate ideju o tome kako se šta dešavalo, kako je vreme teklo i kako se ta zemlja koju danas zovemo Ujedinjeno kraljevstvo, odnosno Engleska, kako se to razvijalo u suštini. Ali sada vam ja tražim tačan datum kada je neki od Plantageneta porobio konačno Škotsku. Ne moram. To je sam početak 18. veka, doduše to je mnogo laka godina za učenje, ali svejedno, ali ne morate da znate to. Ali treba da znate da je ranije 18. vek. Da biste imali ideju, recimo, zašto se danas dešava Brexit. Okay? Any comments, any questions? Kad vas nešto pitam, ako možete ipak odgovoriti u chatu, za svaki slučaj. Okay, I will assume that there are no comments or no questions. So tell me, how did the class with Maria go last week?
Well, it was nice.
Okay, what was nice?
Well, the whole class, I think we were very open for conversation, most of us were, and it just went smoothly. We already knew most of the things that she was talking about.
Right.
So there were no problems at all.
Very good. I mean, this is what these classes are supposed to be about. And if we were in a classroom, you would be speaking a lot more. But please don't take this as a discouraging situation. Just use us, all of us at the department, to talk to us, to express your opinions, and of course, only when you've actually read the materials, because that's also important. Sa puno studenta ja mnogo volim da pričam, to su ljudi koji imaju puno toga da kažu generalno, ali ne volim recimo na časovima da pričam sa njima zato što prosto nikada ne čitaju ono o čemu se govori na času. A to nije naša poenta ovde. Poenta je da svi čitamo iste materijale i da onda na osnovu njih donosimo određene zaključke. Okay, so let's start with the lesson for today, so to say. So as I mentioned, this talk about the early settlers, it goes two different ways. On the one hand, we're talking about this prehistoric period, the period before Christ, or what you see as BC. You know what BC means? I just said it, before Christ. And AD, Anno Domini. Is it a double N or one N? Oh, check it. But it's Anno Domini, the year of our Lord, the period of our Lord, meaning after the birth of Christ. Znači sve ono pre Hrista i posle Hrista, pre nove ere i tako dalje. You get that, right? So on the one hand, we are talking about these first peoples who were present in the area, let's say, of the British Isles, but not really on the British Isles. in the prehistoric period, and we are going to be talking about their systems of beliefs. So there is, in this sort of conversation, we are supposed to learn about what the difference is between a system of beliefs and religion. Do you guys think that there is a difference? A system of beliefs and a religion?
Well, I think that that is.
Wait, Natalia, can you just be louder, and then Luca, you're next.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, better.
Okay. So I think that there is a difference. For example, someone could believe that, I don't know, there is something bigger than us or whatever they want to believe in, but not consider themselves part of any particular religion.
Exactly. Thank you. And this is a very good, very well sort of structured argument. Luca, what did you want to say?
Yes, well, just add that religion is usually a system of beliefs that is organized or centered around a specific book or a specific church or some form of an organization.
Right, and you're right. So a religion usually has a set or even sets of systems of beliefs. I mean, if you just look at Christianity, we are Orthodox, right? So in Christianity, you have the Orthodox, the Catholics, the Methodists, the Baptists, the Pentecostals, I don't know, so many, several hundreds of sects, basically just within Christianity, which was at its own beginning a sect in itself. So every single religion is basically a set of a system, a set of beliefs or a system of beliefs, but that becomes centered around something that is very palpable, okay? Like a book, as Luca mentioned, like an institution, like a church or a synagogue or a mosque, right? Or a temple. So that is really important to know, because every religion begins, in fact, as a set of beliefs. So we are today going to be talking about, sort of when we cover the first peoples, the Neolithic tribes that actually came to the British Isles, we're going to be talking about what kind of beliefs they had. And this is what you usually hear as pagan. And when somebody says pagan, they usually use this with a very negative connotation. Ti pagani, heretici, slično. I mean, throughout centuries, especially Christians, the Jewish, more or less. The Jewish were not as violent as Christians and Muslims, but they have persecuted heathens, the so-called heathens. I mean, to my knowledge, I don't remember the Jewish persecuting the heathens if we disregard the latest conflict between Israel and Palestine, which is basically a religious conflict as well. It's territorial, but also religious. But for example, the Jewish even have an expression for a person who is not of their religion. Did you know this? I find it very interesting. I always find it interesting.
Yes.
Yeah? I mean, that you have a word for the other, as we talked about last week. You actually have a word. And of course, you know that in this PC culture of ours, and especially in the American media, you have recently had these talks about the word alien being sort of substituted for other words, so that people who are actually just immigrants don't get this label of aliens. And mislim, u tom smislu, razumete, to je samo na jezičkom nivou. Ne znam kakav je vaš stav o tim politički korektnim kampanjama, odnosno kampanjama za politički korektan jezik, ali sad da ne zovemo nekog alien, nego immigrant ili nešto drugo, naravno da ima smisla, posebno u kontekstu savremene Amerike, koji je onako prilično zastrašujuć, a s druge strane tu se dolaze nam neki skečevi o tome kako ni vanzemaljce ne bi trebalo da zovemo aliens, nego extraterrestrials. I šta nam to govori? To nam govori o tome da je ta jezička šminka samo šminka, ali da u suštini i dalje te razlike nekako persistiraju u društvu. Recite, Luka.
Pa, ne znam da li ste vidjeli to, postoji intervju sa Slavojim Žižakom, mislim, ja nisam fan svega što on ikad kaže daleko toga, ali Slavoj Žižak je recimo čovjek, da kažem odavde iz Slovenije, koji je tamo živeo i radio godinama i priča je o političkoj korektnosti, kako su zapravo koristili političku korektnost da maskiraju rasizam, ali to nije, da kažem, nije rešilo problem rasizma, već je čak iskomplikovalo problem. Sad je teže da se prepozna ko je rasista.
Tako je. Mislim, ali isto tako, pa moramo hvala vam, Luka, na ovome. Posebno što spominjete Slavoje je jedan od mojih omiljenih osoba svih vremena. Iako se s njim ne slažemo, otprilike vjerojatno 50-60% stvari koje ikad izgovori, ali volim da ga slušam ja. I toplo ga preporučujem svima. A interesantno što vi pričate, što ste ga spomenuli u kontekstu političke korektnosti, jer znamo svi koliko Slavoj psuje. Mislim, to je nevjerovatno. I onda prosto on nema taj filter političke korektnosti, što ne znači da je uvredljiv, jel? Što govori o tome da ne moramo biti uvredljivi samo u slučaju da nismo politički korektni. Zavisi od toga šta govorimo, tako? A ne uvek kako ga kažemo. Ste htjeli još nešto, Luka? Bilo vam je uključen mikrofon?
Ne, samo se složio sa vama.
Ok, super. So yeah, there's that, the political correctness that is not always the best solution, which tells us that systems of beliefs, or even sets of systems, networks, intertwined systems of beliefs, are very deeply woven into our cultures. What does that mean? We celebrate Christmas, guys, right? Most of us celebrate Christmas. Even if we don't celebrate it for, religious reasons, we like to celebrate it because there's a nice tree that we can put up and buy presents for other people, and the New Year is close, and we like that, right? Do you guys celebrate?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Okay, Luca?
Yes, I would like to quickly add, for example, like I'm an atheist. I've almost always been an atheist, but I still celebrate kind of Christmas for like different reasons. So yeah, there's.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I too am an atheist, just so that you guys know, but that doesn't make me insensitive to all of the traditions that are present. I may not believe in one particular God, but I am completely open to all the traditions, let's say. And I love the Christmas tradition. Although it's very consumerist, but I like it. I like it because it's a tradition that has spanned, let's say, at least 7,000 years. At least. And why am I saying this? 7,000 godina stara tradicija sečenja badnjaka. Dobro, ne baš 7,000, pre će biti sa dolaskom Kelta, znači malo manje, jel? Recimo 5,000 godina, manje više. 5,000 godina se taj badnjak seče, pali. Da li ste krenuli da čitate Sir Gawain and the Green Knight?
Noćas,
spremate se polako za srednjovekovnu. These traditions, these pagan traditions that we very often can hear people mention in a negative context, they have persisted over centuries, just taking on a different suit. I mean, all of the saint celebrations, zar vam ne deluje ponekad kao kada, recimo, Meksikanci imaju slično običaj kao i mi na grobljima, pa donose hranu, pa se tu sedi, pa se priča. Samo što Meksikanci, kao i neki Afrikanci, generalno ljudi iz Južne Amerike, neki narodi odatle, kao i neka afrička plemena, znate sami da čak i razgovaraju sa svojim mrtvima po mesec dana, ih čuvaju u svojim kućama. I ceo taj ritual obedovanja na grobovima ne znači ništa morbidno, niti oni imaju nekakvu fascinaciju sa smrću, nego prosto imaju kontakt sa životom, tako se opraštaju, tako izražavaju svoje nedostajanje i tako dalje. To je ritual, je li tako? To i mi imamo, mislim, nadam se da ga više nemamo u toj meri, ali zadnjih 20 godina, 30, posebno sa ratovima i sve, nekako smo se vratili ritualima, pa odete ono na groblje i vidite na tim zadušnicama su kao svako malo, vidite kao tona hrane, vidite čopore pasa lutalica, right? One problem leads to another. But it's ritualistic behavior. And ritualistic behaviors are very typical of all of us because they are what? They are things that we do and repeat in culture, in society, with our friends, with our families. Do you guys have any familial sort of traditions? So something that you do with your family that is traditional or ritualistic? Yes, Manya.
Well, during Christmas, me and my family drive around the town and look at all the Christmas lights, and we judge them, give them scores. Which one is the best?
Okay, I mean that's cool. I hope you're lenient, but I like that tradition. That's nice. That's really nice, and it's very. I mean, it's original. I don't know many people who actually do that. Okay, Ksenia.
Yes, I would like to say that we do the same thing as Vanya.
Okay.
And I would like to say that during Christmas holidays, we don't do some we don't have exactly tradition, but we like to make some show to my family. Me and my aunt, for example, likes to make some show for my family, some Christmas show.
Okay, so that's also very peculiar. That's also very original. I love it. So there's your nuclear family, your closest family, right? Your parents. I don't know if you have any siblings, and there's your aunt. So your community, your little community, is gathered around an event. And you do something every year. Yes, Natalia.
Oh, we actually do something similar to that, but it's not a show. My brother and I make some kind of a quiz about the whole family, and we buy little gifts for everyone, and everyone gets something based on how well they do on the quiz.
I love this. It's also a bit of a blackmailer one, isn't it? Like, if you know me well enough, you get a present. So make sure you know me by the end of the year. No, I like it. But does it really have anything to do with religion? Especially when we talk about Christmas. What does Natalia?
No, not religion.
Sorry?
I don't think it has anything to do with religion. It's more about bringing the family together and just having fun, a nice time.
Exactly. Luca?
Yeah, we had a class about Christmas in middle school one time, and the teacher asked, "What's Christmas about?" And I went in this whole monologue about the family and
a rant or a whinge
and everything. And she was like, "No, it's about Jesus."
Oh, yeah. So whoever celebrates Christmas and cuts the oak tree and celebrates Jesus, I have to tell you guys, it's way, way, way older than Jesus Christ. It was actually a very druidic practice. You know that the oak tree has always been a bit of a sacred tree, and the druids, the Celtic druids, actually used to gather in those forests and cut the oak branches or leaves and trees and burn it so that they would, scare away the evil spirits or sort of warm up as well. I mean, not every single reason is practical, but and when I say that, I actually mean chasing away evil spirits. Can you imagine? We are now, let's say that we are now in 8 to 5,000 years before Christ. 8 do 5,000 godina pre Hrista. We are there. Can you imagine the British Isles? We know that now it's foggy. It's not very mountainous, although it has mountainous regions. It has swamps, it has marshes. We can be quite sure that 8,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago, it had, let's say, before Christ, 5,000 or 8,000 before Christ, that it had more forests, that these forests were populated by wild boars, bigger animals, bigger animal population. Can you imagine the first settlers coming there, basically naked and sort of trying to survive? Can you wrap your mind around it? Do you think that they were the same people as we are today? Kad pričam o ovim stvarima, hoću da se, mislim, o Iliću ovo mnogo da se, pardon, o Lukiću mnogo ovo da se svidi da idem s ovim. Hoću da vam kažem kako su nastale prve religije. Ovo je naravno krajnje simplifikovano, ali hoću da vam objasnim kako je taj čovek koji je živeo u tim praistorijskim vremenima, u Neolitu, na primer, koji jedva ima neki komad kvarca koje je koristio, razumete, da nešto seče, neko meso. Mi danas kvarc koristimo za proizvodnju raznoraznih materijala, za meditaciju, za 1000 drugih stvari. On jadan je koristio taj komad kamena kao, ne znam, kao prvu pomoć ko mi danas telefon. Ne možete zamisliti tu osobu. Znači, od krvi mesa kao i mi, isti kapacitet mozga, ništa se tu nema razlike, jel tako? Da ta osoba koja je rođena pre 8000 godina, da se rodi sada, normalno bi bila osoba. Mislim, i to je pripadnik naše vrste, ne bi mu ništa falilo. Ili bi bio jednako prosječan koji svi ostali. Ono ništa. How could this person feel? What do you think? Let me help you with that. So around 3005 to 3000 BC, the first people started settling the British Isles. At that point in time, the English Channel, La Manche, it wasn't as wide as it is today. In fact, if let's say the British Isles became islands about 8000 BC, so you can imagine the water was more shallow. And whoever ever visited, let's say, the Atlantic Ocean in Western Europe, you might have noticed that the tide and ebb are very powerful, very strong. You can see very, obvious differences after tides and ebbs. Znate o čemu pričam? Plima i oseka, ko je bio na Atlantiku nekad, da vidite. Vi dođete pre podne i do popodneva kilometar se voda povukla, što je prosto neshvatljivo nama. Mislim, nikad ko nije to video, prosto interesantno je videti. Ostanu školjke i svašta nešto, mada mora nije za kupanje nešto mnogo. But you can imagine thousands of years ago that the waters were different. It was more shallow. So what they could do is actually from the Iberian Peninsula go, through what we today called France, from Netherlands, what we today call the Netherlands. Basically, they would find a way around the English Channel or across the English Channel, and they would reach the British Isles. Why was it very good for them to reach the British Isles? These first peoples, they were the so-called Iberians. I'm going to write it down, but you have it in your books. Iberians. The Iberians were, let's say, people much like us, physically, ethnically, the very resembling the contemporary Spanish people very much, so the Mediterranean type, let's say darkish looking, perhaps not as tall as the Celts later on, etc. So the Iberians were the first ones to reach the British Isles, and with them, they didn't really bring any specific technology. You can imagine, as I mentioned, basically flint, quartz, maybe some sort of wooden tools, but that was it. They didn't really have any specific manufacture. They were basically hunters and gatherers, and that was their way of life, perhaps even nomadic, right? And you can imagine in these forests of the British Isles, with so many wild animals there, it was very, very difficult for them to survive. This is why it took ages. Nekad razmišljaju o tome zašto mi živimo uopšte u društvu? Zašto smo toliko društvena bića? Da li je to nešto nama tako urođeno ili možda imamo nešto... Ajde, Vanja pa Luka.
I think that people were really weak alone, strong together. As for example, the women were maybe weaker physically, but they had some more keen senses and they knew how to be around the younger people, so they stayed back at home, while the men, while bigger and stronger, went out and hunted. The reason they started doing
that, I mean, yes, for the most part, yes, but you know why women? I don't think all women were probably weaker, but all women have always been a very valuable resource. Znate, kad gledamo društvo, hvala Vanja, duše, to je totalno on point, nego sam samo htjela da vas, da budemo precizniji. U čemu je taka? Nije svaki, kad gledamo takvo vreme, when we observe these sort of social structures, not every individual is worth the same, right? They're not, if you are not a good hunter, if you're not a good gatherer, and you're a male, are you worth to your tribe? Probably not. But if you're a young woman with a functioning uterus, you're very, very valuable to your tribe because you can produce offspring. You know, so that was that. And the first peoples, in fact, the first the first Neolithic Stone Age people, they didn't really know what the role of men was in procreation. So that's very important to know. They didn't really know that men participated in the act of creating life. This was very important. And this is when we talk about matriarchy. The woman was the one doing the decision making. She was the protector of the hearth, the protector of the house, things like that. Yes, men would go out and hunt, but because you don't want your most valuable members of society to get killed. You know, if one man gets killed, you can still make a new one. Ne pričamo ovo tipa da je to moje mišljenje. Ne znam da li me razumete i pratite. Znači, to definitivno nije moje mišljenje. Nego prosto vam govorim o tim vrlo pragmatičnim uslovima, to jest vrlo opasnim uslovima u kojima su oni morali da budu pragmatični. Da, Luka?
Trudim se da se ne javljam previše, ali mi je ovo previše interesantno. They were probably feeling overpowered by nature, by other surrounding factors. They basically felt like they were at the mercy of storms, of winds, of
the elements,
the rain,
exactly, yes.
The elements, yes. And that's why they kind of formed rituals and religions to appease the elements, and they also formed certain societal structures that at the time were the best they could come up with.
Yes,
but later on they had better repercussions.
Structures that were best at the time.
Yes,
that's also very important. This little phrase, "at the time," you know. And we have lived for centuries according to certain structures that were sort of that were made back in the day, like back in the Stone Age. Muškarac treba da zaradi dovoljno da izdržava ženu i decu. Zašto? Mislim, zašto kad ne živimo više u pećinama, tako? Ne treba nam veliki muškarac koji će da ide i da ubija životinje i da ih to vlači kuću. Mislim, super, ali kao ne mora. Natalija, kažete?
Yeah, I just want to add that hunting was an uncertain source of getting food.
Yes.
They would go out and hunt, but they would never know if they were going to catch something or not. So
yes.
That's why gatherers were, I think, a bit more important than hunters, because they were more likely to find some kind of food than hunters.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, it probably depended on the thank you for saying this. It probably depended on the season as well. But that is the thing, right? Man, as in humans, are an extremely adaptable species. We have adapted through everything. And Luca mentioned it earlier. So, depending on the circumstances, the fears that they had, the fear of the elements, kad kažemo fear of the elements, mislim na, bukvalno oni su bili ostavljeni pod vedrim nebom, ali tako, a nebo nekad i nije bilo vedro, znači, to su vremenski uslovi, klima, promene sezona, mislim, gledajte mene, ja u džemperu, oktobar je, meni je hladno, ja bi bila prva koja bi nastradala u to vreme, mislim, nema šanse se naviknem na to. Zamislite sad njih, kako je njima bilo. I onda, so when you think about it in those lines, you start thinking about rituals, and you start thinking about the first sets of beliefs in a different way. Imagine a stone age person looking at the sky or looking around himself or herself. What could they see? What was always there for them to see? What do you guys think? Šta je uvek oko nas? Mislim, dan, noć, uvek nešto možemo da vidimo. I to je ono obično kad se probudimo ujutru pa otvorimo prozor ili podignemo roletne i bacimo pogled, pogledamo nebo, ako ništa drugo. I šta možemo da vidimo? Možemo da vidimo
the sun.
Sorry?
The sun.
It's either the sun or it's
the moon and the stars.
And the stars. I mean, you guys, I don't know if you've ever been somewhere like in the mountains or in the countryside, far away from cities, and then you look at the sky and you can actually see the stars. In cities, we cannot see the stars, not the way that people can see them in places which are removed from urban areas, because the lights reflect and we just don't see it. We don't see them. But can you imagine for the Stone Age person, they would look at all those stars, they would look at the moon, they would look at the sun, and they would see them every morning, every, sunset, every night. So is it really that strange that the first deities that they started believing in were actually the celestial bodies? Ilya?
I think it's worth noting that as the time progressed, people believed that anything they didn't understand or get is some form of a more powerful being. So, for example, I'm pretty sure the cavemen were certain that the fire was something incredible, something which they cannot do. But as the time progressed, they started learning. So I think it's still the same way now, that we believe that God or whatever is anything we don't understand ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, we live in completely different times. It's very difficult for us to understand these things, right? To go back. But I don't think it's that necessary. I mean, sorry, is that difficult? Samo pogledajte odnos ljudi prema koroni. Korona je virus. Virus je nevidljiv golim okom. Virus može da vas inficira. I mi smo to naučno dokazali, ali vi imate ljudi koji ne veruju u to. Ili veruju da virus ne može da pređe sa kašičice na čoveka u toku pričesti. Ima tu, mislim, kada govorimo, when we talk about these things, the first sets of beliefs and then the development of systems of beliefs, we talk about both certain very human, very primitive, primal, kad kažem primitivno ne mislim u negativnom smislu, nego prosto ono što je primitivno u nama, as in certain urges for sustenance, for sexual reproduction, things that control our body temperature. So sort of we are primitive and primal in that sense forever. We will always be that way. But we have different modes of existing right now. So for us, we don't pay attention to that as much as they did. But imagine yourself completely naked, left to the elements, to basically the mercy of just situations. You understand nothing. It is normal to desire to have something bigger than yourself to believe in. Ako ste, možda ste nekad kao deca imali imaginarne prijatelje. Strah, jako zanimljiv pokretač kod čoveka. Strah je nešto što je čak i vrlo kreativno. Možda i zove kreativne adaptacije. And man, humans, are very poetic beings. We always make a story out of something, don't we? Whenever we talk about something, we always tend to make a story out of it. And especially when it comes to rituals, especially when it comes to certain communal stories, etc., which is also something I want to talk to you about. But to go back to the Iberians just for a second. So the Iberians were the typical Stone Age people, very technologically unadvanced, right? So they didn't have much. But then there came to the first mingling, the so-called mingling of the races. So very, very soon, about 2,400 years before Christ, the Beaker folk, who were actually Bronze Age people, came to the British Isles and basically intermingled with the Iberians. These Beaker folk, as you can sort of guess from the name that they carry, they already had production, they already knew ways of producing beakers, so different sort of dishes. What I mean dish, I mean like, you know, posude. Beaker, you know what a beaker is? It's a very specific kind of container for water. Znate što je beaker?
Ne.
Krčag.
Da.
Ono sa onim napred delom za vodu. Znači oni su to pravili od zemlje, odnosno od gline, ali tako. They made it out of clay. And they also sort of had the basics in agriculture. So they basically transformed the habits and the practices of the Iberians that were populating the British Isles in a very interesting way. So there were a more advanced sort of people, and they just intermingled. It is interesting that there weren't many conflicts between the two of them. It's very interesting. Zato što, ne znam da li ste čitali o tome ili gledali možda neke dokumentacije slično, ali znate koliko su se naši preci, tipa Kromanjonci, Neandertalci, Homo erectus, tako dalje, oni su svi međusobno ubijali. Znate za to?
Da.
Čuli nekad? Prilično je onako scary da zapravo da je bilo toliko ljudskih vrsta, mislim, su neke minorne razlike, razumete, u veličini lobanje, na primjer, ili nešto tako, ali oni su se međusobno ubijali. Retko kad su se međusobno parili. Pitanje je uopšte da li parili se, razmnožavali. Ali pitanje je da li to moglo i da li to i bilo moguće. Anyway, that was just an unnecessary digression, perhaps. So the Beaker folk intermingled with the Iberians, making it the first intermingling of the races, first mixing of the races on the British Isles. Now, the third people, the third tribe, let's say tribe group that I want to mention today are basically the Celts, who came, let's say, around 500 BC, more or less, to the British Isles, and they established their own place there. And this is how, you know, there wasn't just one Celtic tribe, there were many. You probably know about the Gauls, right?
Yes.
Da li ste nekad gledali Asterixa I Obelixa?
Yes.
Yeah, well, they were the Gauls. So you know them as French, but they actually also make the ethnic type of today's UK. So the Celts brought, especially the Gauls, they actually brought their language to certain parts of England. And when you take a look at the map, now I should have just Googled the map and show it to you, but never mind that. Can you take a look at this part here? So there's the La Manche, right? And the La Manche and this is basically the parts of Europe. When you see it like that, sorry. Here is La Manche is here, Dover. So when you think about it, how could the UK, today's UK, or just the British Isles, could it have stayed without any sort of influence from other places? Danas često pričamo o tome kako su Englezi vrlo specifični s ovim Brexitom i sve to, oni, this country is an island, basically. Danja, kažete.
Slučajno sam uključila mikrofon, izvinite.
Kakve su sve uticaje mogli da sretnu? What do you guys think? So the Gauls came from what we would call Normandy, or even from Central Europe. The Britons, also more or less Western Europe, and they gave the territory its name. The Gauls gave it the language. The Celts themselves, when they came to the British Isles, this was the third very important mixing of the races. And this is why we have very different sort of people inhabiting different parts of the British Isles. So the Celts can be found in Cornwall, Wales, in the Scottish Highlands, for example, but also some can be found even on the Irish Islands. But we'll talk about that when the Romans come. The Romans had to do with that. What do you think? Could England, or the British Isles, could the British Isles have stayed isolated, unaffected? It's almost like a trick question. Probably not. Definitely not. So in any case, we will cover this just so far. So three sort of first peoples, kad kažem peoples, vi znate kako to koristim, people je narod, peoples su narodi, ali misli se na narodi kao nacije, ne na narodi kao ljudi. So the first peoples who came to the British Isles were the Iberians, the Mediterranean type, so to say. Then they intermixed, then they mixed with the Beaker folk, and eventually they mixed with the Celts. The next big mixing will be with the Romans, but it will be a sort of a different kind of mixing or exchanges of cultures. But the Celts are very important because they also brought their own systems of beliefs. Now, when I mentioned earlier the first peoples sort of having this fear and trying to give their life and their surroundings meaning, I was really, when talking about Stone Age people, we are basically talking about matriarchal societies. Not necessarily matriarchal in any, idealistic kind of way, or in any, when I say this, I mean, I'm not saying that this is a better social type of organization or that patriarchy is better. I'm just trying to be, trying to present facts here, not to trigger anyone. So the first tribes were very much matriarchal. What did that mean? It means that the communal life, the center of the communal life, belonged to women. That means that they were the decision makers. They made probably the important decisions. We talked about it earlier. Luca and Natalia gave some more information about how these people, about the hunting and gathering aspects of these tribes, or the ways that they sort of tried to survive. But when it comes to a matriarchy, we can sort of isolate some very specific things, rituals-wise, that belong to their specific culture. Znači, vi možete da imate kulturu bez religije, možete da imate kulturu i razna verovanja. Kultura nije uvek u vezi sa religijom. Nadam se to znate, ali tako? Ste toga svesni?
Yes.
Ok, mnogo bitno. Kao što kad kažu srpska kultura i odmah čujete neke crkvene horove. Give me a break. Mislim, ne mora to da bude, nije nama pravoslavlje, ne izlazi nam iz ušiju, izlazi nam iz ušiju zadnjih 20 godina, od kad se Jugoslavija raspala, to je već 30. Ali mi pre toga nismo slavili ništa. Ne znam da li znate za to. Mislim, volila bih neka stvar, o tome treba pričati, o toj interesantnoj pojavi, recimo, slava nasilnog kako kažem, pokrštavanja ponovo, pomodarskog pokrštavanja i tako dalje. Ali to na stranu. So, they had their own specific culture. What is very interesting with matriarchal tribes, such were the Iberians, is that they believed in the so-called moon goddess, or the goddess of all being, the goddess of complete being, the white goddess, etc. Now, why? Because every time that they would, the night would fall and they would see the moon was always so bright. Znači, mi govorimo o vremenu kad nismo imali svetiljki tako to, nego bukvalno nebeska tela su vam jedina svetla koje možete da koristite. Da mislite koliko je to za njih strašno bilo. A šta se pojavljuje svake noći na nebu? Pojavi se mesec koji eventualno nešto osvetli i onda oni zapravo dobiju pomoć. Tako, oni nešto vide. Mislim, to je njima bila velika stvar. Videti na mesečini. So, this is probably how one of the first deities was created, and this was the white goddess, the great goddess, goddess of complete being, etc. Now, in the book, you will read that she had many aspects, many facets, and this is also very interesting, but these facets and aspects came only later on. Of course, when these members of these communities started thinking about their goddess and other deities. It is also very interesting that in the first myths, the first cosmologies, so to say, znate beše šta je kozmologija? Jel da, sam vam pričala o tome? A cosmology...
Pa u principu sklop mitova o tome kako svet funkcioniše.
Da, ili kako je nastao jedan narod, na primjer. We talk about national cosmology, a cosmology of a people. For example, in Greek mythology, you have the myths of creation that are very different from myths of creation of, let's say, Babylonians. Well, not that different. Or Egyptians or other peoples. Okay, but every single, even a people, like a nation, has its own myth of creation. Zar ne? Samo što nekad zaboravimo taj mit, pa onda negde u našoj savremenosti pokušavamo da ga retroaktivno nađemo. Znate vi kad je snimljen prvi film o boju na Kosovu? Ovo je bolna tema verovatno, ali moram da pređem, čisto da znate kako priče funkcionišu.
Možda 60-ih 20. veka.
Kasnije. Onaj najpoznatiji...
80.
Ali nije it's not an incident. Najpoznatiji film o boju na Kosovu snimljen je pred Miloševićev odlazak na Kosovo, kad je rekao vas ne sme niko da bije, pa ispod vidite kako sme. Tad je snimljen film Boj na Kosovu i tad je puštena priča, razumete, propagandno, o celo ono što smo pričali prošlog puta, o toj nekoj ideji kako bi trebalo da damo svoje živote za ovo, svoje živote za ono i tako dalje. Tako da, hoću vam kažem, priče su jako moćne, posebno kad narod nema tu neku ideju, mislim, možete zamisliti Jugoslavija koja se raspada, Jugoslovenija, ljudi koji su odrasli slušajući više jezika, koji su odrasli u nekom potpuno drugačijem svetu, nekoj drugačijoj ideji sveta, njima se sve raspada i treba im nešto novo, treba im nešto što će im dati smisao. I šta traži, važi, dajem ti smisao, sad ćeš da živiš neku legendu koja će ponovo da zaživi. I tako nastaje Talait. But anyway, these people had their own myths of creation. Have you ever heard of the myth of Persephone, for example?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Natalia and Luca know it. I know Theodora probably knows it. Anyone else? Have you ever heard of Persephone and Hades and
Yes.
Demeter? Yeah.
I did.
Yeah. So these were the legends, the stories, the myths that actually reflect the beliefs of these matriarchal peoples. What was very interesting about the matriarchal peoples is that they didn't really live against nature. They didn't really live with fear of death. They, in fact, had this belief that just as a human being is born, it is completely natural to grow old and to die, or just to die, because by dying, you're not really leaving the world, you're actually going back to your mother, going back to the Mother Earth. Of course, we must never romanticize these people, as we shouldn't demonize them either. Razumete šta hoću da kažem? Toga je lako da ih romantizujemo, kažemo, oni su živjeli u skladu sa prirodom, oni nisu verovali u smrt kao konačnost, pa realno, mislim, šta su pa mogli da urade po tom pitanju, kad pogledate? Mislim, da li su imali nekakav izbor? Zamislite u tom trenutku, jeste imali nekakav izbor? Da li ćete da verujete vi u smrt, da li ćete da ne verujete u nju? Smrt vam na svakom koraku, bukvalno ustanete ujutru i neki divlji vepar vas, nabije u drvo i to je to kraj. Napadne vas neki vuk. Kao ono kad gledate Posetioce, sećate se onog filma Le Visiteur, Godfrey i onaj Jacques, kad gledate njihov šok kad dolaze u sadašnjost, znate za taj film, francuski?
Da.
Taj neki feeling, razumete, neverice i prosto neverovanja da šta će nam se desi, ali zamislite te jadne ljude iz kamenog doba, šta su drugo mogli da bi preživeli osim da prosto nekako prihvate svoju smrtnost, ali but to sort of transform it into an ideology, although this is a very strong word, a philosophy, okay, that is actually humane. So when you die, you go back to the Mother Earth. And so they would make, and this is really interesting, they would make communal burials. So they would bury their dead together, and they would bury them in the ground in holes, but on top of those holes, they would make like breast-shaped mounds. Breast-shaped mounds because obviously your mother's breasts suck you into life again. And so they thought if they made a symbolic sort of gesture of burying their dead under those mounds, that their dead would come back to them, that Mother Earth would bring them back. And of course, this sort of matriarchal lifestyle implied a very acute understanding of how seasons work. I mentioned the myth of Persephone because it's a very interesting myth. So she's the daughter of Demeter, who's the goddess of fertility, of crops, boginja useva, of spring, not spring per se, but of the sort of the sowing, right, of the fields. So she's all that has to do with agriculture, but also seasons when agriculture booms, right, blooms. So in any case, Demeter loves her daughter very much, and they're very close. But since Persephone is so beautiful, she is noticed by Hades, who actually steals her from her mother one day in the field, never mind. And she's held against her will in Hades's underground, and she's not supposed to come out, and she's suffering, she's sad, her mother is looking for her the entire time, she cannot find her, etc., etc. I will not tell you the myth in detail because I will ask Maria to do it tomorrow. But what I want to say is, so eventually, Hades takes pity on Persephone's mother's pain and Persephone's own pain. And he says, if you really don't want to be here, if you don't love me, you're free to go if you haven't eaten of the fruit of the underworld. But you know the story. Persephone ate just one pomegranate seed. Ste čuli neka za to?
I think it was 6. And because 6, she has to spend 6 months in the underworld.
The thing is, right, the symbolism of numbers is added always. It is, sort of, it doesn't really matter how many she ate. In one version you will have this, in the other that. But the point is, she ate of the sort of the food of the underworld, so she's bound to the underworld as well. So what is the final deal? The final deal between Hades and Demeter is that she will have her daughter for 6 months a year, and he will have her for 6 months of the year. So he will have her in the fall, autumn, and winter months, and she will have her in spring and summer. So isn't that interesting, guys? Because Demeter, when she, when her daughter goes back to the underworld to be with Hades, she will yet again be sad. The crops will, die down. Everything, the entire nature will sort of be frozen until her daughter returns to her in spring. And then everything is fine. So through this story, what does man tell you, basically? What does this poetic sort of man tell you? That he understands that there is some sort of regularity with which things happen, that there are some sort of cycles that he can notice in nature. And these cycles he begins to celebrate. So that's what's interesting. Znači, čovjek nije, inicijalno, ni on slavio neke ljude i ne znam ja šta. On je inicijalno slavio cikluse koje mogu da primeti. That's what's called nature worship. So the cycles basically of life, of seasons, of nature, and man, not because these Stone Age people, Neolithic people were so special. No, they were not special. They were just forced to adapt to circumstances. They did live in accordance with nature because they had to. Could we live like that? What do you guys think? Jel neko od vas voli da ide na kampovanje? Kažete, Luka.
I mean, it really depends. I think for the most part, no, because we're definitely for now at least, we're in a period of where we are the ones affecting the environment around us and not the other way around.
Oh yeah, that's not even, I didn't even get to that question. Our relationship with the environment, with the earth is just appalling. That is...
Yeah, unfortunately. But who knows, I mean, after global warming or whatever, we don't really know exactly what's going to happen. But I think we can definitely, on a personal level, work on at least the feeling of being one with nature, because there is...
Sorry, I have to stop you. What do you think? What represents nature to you guys? Ja znam šta meni, kad ja kažem priroda, znam šta je to meni, but most of you have lived in Niš, right? Or anyway, in your own city. Šta je za vas priroda?
Mene pitate li?
Sve vas pitam, ne samo vas. Pitanje za sve. Šta je vama priroda? Šta je vama priroda? Evo, vi odete nekad u neko vaše selo, pa se skidete bosi, pa hodate po travi. Pa si pitate još šta ćemo jede, da li ću se obolimo nešto. Jel imate taj neki moment da vam je to priroda?
Yes.
Kažete Vanja, pa onda Luka, pa onda Predrag.
Meni je lično priroda, sednem tu na reci, pecam, mir tišina, nema niko, samo sam ja tu sam sa sobom i mogu da razmišljam o bilo čemu, jednostavno da sam tu.
Dobro. Vama je boravak u prirodi neka vrsta mindfulnessa, da tako kažem. Vraća vas sebi, što je mnogo lepo.
Yeah, something like more of like a calm state of mind, nothing bothers me, I bother nothing.
Nice. Predrže?
Well, for me personally, it's like running through cornfield while watching sunset.
Oh, okay. Running through a cornfield while watching... Have you ever done that?
Yes, I have, yeah.
Jel ste vi odrasli na selu ili onako obilazili bake i deke po selu? Pa imate osjećaj za polje kukuruza? Ne čuje Predrag.
Pa ne, nego, ali imamo njivu, moje baka i deka, pa eto tu. Kao mali sam trčao, da.
Kad imate takva iskustva.
Jest.
Ok. Luka?
Da, pa mislim, konkretno da, okolina, the environment, definitivno postoje, da kažem, određeni izgled estetika koju vezano za prirodu, ali meni lično, na primjer, volim da delim stvari više po tome, recimo, ako gledamo na društvo i na prirodu kao dve suprotnosti, dve odvojene stvari, društvo bi bilo ono gde bi bilo okruženje na koje su stvorili ljudi, koje zavisi od društva, od toga kako se ljudi ponašaju to, a recimo priroda bi bio neki moment kada smo sami sa sobom ili kada možemo da se konsultujemo, da kažem, sa svojom unutrašnjom prirodom. Ali naravno u tome pomaže samoća u divljenju.
Okay, I get that, yeah. I like hiking. I like walking through the wilderness in silence. I don't like talking to people. That's why I rarely go, because you can't go alone. And you need, Dimitrije.
You can't as a woman. You can as a man.
No, not as a woman. I just don't have a car, and I would hate to buy a car for these sort of things. Not because I'm a woman. I don't care. I don't feel threatened. I just don't have a car. Okay, Dimitri?
Yeah, I wanted to say something about hiking. I like it as well, especially when it's not planned, because it happened a couple of times to go hiking completely unplanned, and it was really amazing. To be surrounded by nature, and I've even ran into a couple of people, and it was pretty nice. So, I mean, hiking is a way to connect with nature. So,
and to remember that we are creatures that walk. Amazing. Sorry?
I said it's something really amazing, and it helps you de-stress and such.
Yeah. It reminds us that we are creatures that walk. We are not supposed to only be sitting down, lying down. We're supposed to do things around, on our feet. But what I wanted to ask you, with all of these answers, like these idyllic pictures in your minds of what nature is, etc., don't you find even the urban surroundings sort of natural? They are natural to us.
True.
Ovo je sad malo opšte pitanje, s ovim pitanjem ću vas i ostaviti, završit ću čas. Možda je razlog zbog koga se ovako ružno ponašamo prema našem okruženju, upravo to što smo izgubili kontakt baš sa tim, što živimo neku ideju da je priroda nešto idilično, prelepo, ne znam nija kakvo, i negde u nekoj daljini, jer mi više nismo okruženi prirodom, a onda se setite, pa tu i neka reka, tu i neki park, ima tu neke travice, ima barem korova oko nas, ako ništa drugo, i to je neka priroda u kojoj mi živimo, u kojoj je naša kuća, a mi nju tretiramo kao da je onako jedan otpad. I možda u tome veliki problem sa nama, što ne shvatamo da je ovo naša priroda. Ok, guys, da li imate još neko pitanje u vezi sa kolokvijumima? Ako ne, zaustavit ćemo se ovde, znači ono što treba da znate je...
Ja, možete opet samo da kažete koji su datumi?
Ne mogu, zato što nisam ni tako rekla. Rekla sam kraj novembra, zadnja nedelja novembra, prvi, i prvi čas vežbi posle odmora. Posle novogodišnjih praznika bit će za drugi.
Hvala.
To je to. Any questions about today's class? Tomorrow with Maria you will talk about the myths of synchronization and the myths of dissociation, which has to do with what I told you today. And basically that's it. That's the most interesting part of this course. Ništa ljudi, to je to ako nemate nikakvih drugih pitanja. Vidimo se sledeće nedelje.
Bye.